Hey, Donald Miller here. So it is June 6th. So let's. I had a request for a video, so we're gonna do this. All right, and the request was advice for a fourth year guy, and I was lucky enough that I practice underneath my mentor from year 3 to year 5. So I just had one master mechanic above me for almost 3 years, and he was about 20 years older than me. So my later stages of my apprenticeship, the learning curve was amazing. Okay, so we are gonna. I'll talk about fourth year though. All right. Um. So we call them rhythms. All right, and what a rhythm is when you go to do a task and nothing breaks your concentration doing that task. Okay, and we called it getting into a rhythm. All right, and a good practice, okay, especially for someone who's a fourth year, is how long can you stay in a rhythm. That means no phone breaks, no one breaking your concentration, no conversations. Like, how long can you get into a task and stay focused on that task without having to go to the truck for materials or leaving your work area for materials? So it requires you to think ahead, whether it be materials, looking at how much your job that you have to do, and having all the correct tools to do it. And you would think this would be easy, and it's not. It takes some practice to get into even like a 1 hour rhythm, okay? And then your goal from 1 hour would be going to two to three, 3 to 4. And that you're trying to stay in rhythm without being knocked out. All right. It's not easy. So being a fourth year, that's something that you should be really focusing on, especially if you ever are going to try to be an independent contractor. And we'll go into that a little bit more on fourth year. Grouping work together. So fourth years should be able to, if you have a punch list of 8 items, all right, how you arrange those items to be done can benefit you or hinder you. So you really need to start analyzing, grouping your work together so it flows efficiently. Whether it be, if, like, when you're devicing out, are you going to device out outlets first, or are you devicing out switches first, or light fixtures? Okay. Typically, if I'm going to device something out, I like to take care of all my feeds first. Wherever my feeds are going, my feed in, my feed outs, and I want to get all my feeds together. That way, I can juice it if I need to juice it, and I can test, and all my switch legs should be dead. It depends on each job, and that's another fundamental about fourth year is what happens on job A. It might be similar to job B, but there's always going to be little differences, okay? And you're learning how to troubleshoot at this point, okay? And how well you troubleshoot will either hinder you or push you further along. All right, and I was taught troubleshooting by a pretty good guy and the reason why I think he was a pretty good guy troubleshooting wise, because later on in my career, I would be troubleshooting with other guys, and the troubleshooting techniques I was taught would solve problems very fast. And I've watched guys try to troubleshoot something for an hour while I'm on another side of the project, and I come over and I resolve the issue within 5 minutes. And it's all because I was taught different troubleshooting techniques. So your fourth year is going to be about that. You're going to start learning the advanced skills of the trade, not just to become a mechanic, but how far advanced of a mechanic do you want to become? All right. So that's usually like a pretty good fourth year. You're also learning how to be organized, whether it be your tool bag, how are you arranging materials on your site, how are you arranging, if you have a van, if you're working out of a van, how well do you keep that van organized, and organized in a manner that benefits your work. So when you become guys that have a really nice van, typically will organize their van so the most used products are close to the door, while products that are seldom used are stored away so they're not in the way all the time. Okay, if you're only using an oscillating tool once a month, that should be tucked into one of the storage bins instead of, a fish. If you're using a fish every day, a fish should be right by the door. All right. If you're using a pipe bender every day, your pipe bender should be hanging up by the door. Okay, whatever size you use most often should be in front, where 1 inch should be in the back. Okay, and that type of organization really does benefit you, and you should be learning that. That's a really nice skill to have. Another skill is, depending on who you're working with, your fourth year, you should be left alone. Your goal is to be left alone as long as possible. So typically, the goal would be to be left alone for 2 hours. You do not need any babysitting. You don't need anyone coming up to you for like larger tasks, not like simple little stuff, but like complicated tasks. You shouldn't be babysat. You should be able to fundamentally understand all the responsibilities that go along with that task. And sometimes you can only do it for 2 hours. Well, that's a good start. Okay, then get to 4. Okay, and then try to go for 6, and then go for a full day. When you start being left alone for a full day, and basically you're just given instructions and materials, and you can be trusted to fulfill your responsibilities, that's a pretty good fourth year. Like you're doing well. And the more complicated the task and the more that you can accomplish, the better. Okay, like 8 hours devising out a house, let's put it something, a decent 2-year guy can do that. Okay, but you do a commercial outfit like a Sunoco or something. All right, a 2-year guy is not going to be able to do that. Okay, you're going to need to be like a 4-year guy or above, and so depending on the skill level of what you're doing, will be able to dictate how long you should be able to be left alone and accomplish that. Now, as far as your installation habits, okay, you should be able to install things in a quality manner. And to the point where now you are building, we call them your signatures, okay? So if for the last 15 years, if you go into any of my switch boxes, okay, I do my grounds the same way, I do my neutrals the same way, I set up my feeds the same way, I set up my switch legs the same way, and they're all neat and orderly, and it's a very nice looking box. Okay, so my signature typically would be how I arrange my neutrals over into like straight down, maybe diagonal into one corner, and then I drag them across the bottom of the box with a nice wire nut, tight braiding only. My braiding only goes for about a half an inch beyond the nut, and then the wires are no longer braided. That way you have flexibility with the wire. If you have braiding running over an inch below your wire nut, your wire is now stiff and you're not really pliable with it, okay? And it can run into problems. It can run into you having to push too hard. You know, now next thing you know, the metal box, if you're using metal boxes, are loose, okay? You can damage the drywall. So those kind of signatures and those techniques, you should be mastering at that point. You know, 4 years, you should really have a firm grasp on what quality work demands out of your hands and be able to do that, okay? So you should be really working on those kind of things. You know, stripping wires, okay? Techniques on stripping wires. You should know various different techniques, whether you're holding the wire with your linemans and stripping with your strippers, or are you holding the wire with your linemans and stripping with your dikes? If you are attempting to use your dikes, there should be no nick in that copper wire, regardless if you're using, like, so one technique is 4 fingers in front of the box. You put your dikes on your index finger or your thumb and you pry. That's one method. Another method is hold your linemans at 4 fingers length, put your linemans where your index finger is, and then use your angled dikes and pry. Okay, both of those methods though, there should not be a single nick or scratch in the copper. If you have the time with your dikes in hand, you should be able to expand that rubber and stretch it and pop the rubber off without touching the copper in any way. No reaming, don't do this. That's the worst thing you can do with your dikes. It's a straight dike on, pry off. That's it. And a 4th year guy typically, you know, I actually had to show my mechanic my technique before he would allow me to do it, just because there's so many bad techniques out there. You really need to focus on getting the bad wiring techniques out of your system at 4 years. And you probably learned, you know, 4 years in, you've probably worked with enough jackasses out there to know right from wrong. And you probably have seen competent electricians as well as failures. You don't want bad wiring techniques, and you want to make sure you recognize the bad techniques and not do them, okay? That's really like 4th year is you're really honing in your skills, and you're starting to learn how to manage yourself. You know, I would say 5th year, you're starting to learn how to manage projects, like small ones at first, and then on from there. But really, your 4th year, you should be learning how to manage yourself, okay? And that's what we talk about, the rhythms, being left alone for 2, 4, 6 hours, taking the responsibility of the job on, not making excuses, really being a technician or a journeyman that the senior guys can rely on. And the more that they can rely on you, the more responsibility you're going to be given, and the closer you're going to become to being a 5th year and above. As far as, you know, code is concerned, you should be able to apply code. Okay, maybe not load calculations 100%, but you should have a pretty good grasp of code of what you're working with, okay? Understanding the code, understanding you should start understanding why the code is the way it is. Not just understanding the code, but understanding why the code is there. Again, their fourth year has on-site training, but there's also book knowledge that you really need to start, diving into. All right, because in fifth year, technically, you should have the hours and book knowledge to go take your test, your master's test. All right. You can take a journeyman's test, like a 3-year in test, but typically at 5 years, if you're pursuing to be an independent contractor, you should start studying. All right. And being an independent contractor, if you have a decent guy that you're working from, then you start learning the other side of the trade as far as finances, what your overhead would look like, cost of the van, cost of materials, billing, estimating, those kind of items. If you're working with a guy that has you on the road of being an independent contractor, that doesn't always. Not all fourth year apprentices are going down that road. Some are going down the road that they're going to be bending pipe for the rest of their life. And, the same criteria applies to pipe work, okay, as far as the fundamentals are concerned. But, the financial and the management side of things is going to be different, all right? But as far as fundamental skills are concerned, grouping your work hour together, grouping a work day together, same thing. So, God bless. It's Thursday. Be careful out there.